Earlier today, I had the privilege of testifying before the Senate Appropriations subcommittee that's led by Senator Lindsey Graham regarding the protection of religious freedom abroad. As we just heard from Franklin Graham, it's happening at an alarming rate. Now, I stated during the hearing that the growing indifference toward religious freedom is sending a dangerous message to the enemies of human rights. Unfortunately, I don't know that the White House is getting the message. And to a point that I made, I think I actually made it yesterday in Houston with the pastors, people are saying, you know what, I just don't see the changes that we make when we get involved in elections. Let me just say, the hearing that happened today is the result of the elections this past November. This issue has not been addressed in the Senate in the last 6 years. But now that the Republicans are in control, they're giving attention to what I believe are the greatest threats facing not only our nation, but the world today. Join me now to highlight this event is the man who led the hearing today on protecting religious freedom, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, thank you, Tony. You did a very fine job today. The whole panel did. I was very impressed.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, as I said this afternoon, I appreciate the fact that you're putting a spotlight on this issue. And you indicated today that this was just the first of many initiatives that you'll be undertaking to put the proper attention on religious freedom.
Yeah, what we'll do, the Foreign Operations account is all foreign assistance. It's the State Department's budget. It's our aid to Israel. It's aid to every country in the world. And there's a small, I thought Rabbi Silberstein did a very good job, and we're going to try to empower him and push him to do better. But I'm going to create a section, I think, in the bill for the first time just for this topic, to have a separate standalone section within our foreign assistance budget to deal with the religious liberties.
Well, it was interesting. Very good participation from the members of the committee, other senators that came. I gained from the questions that were asked that this is an issue that is certainly on the radar screen of many senators.
Well, what we're doing, I led off with the idea this is 2015, not 1015, and as I speak, women are being raped, sold into slavery, children are being crucified, people are being beheaded and burned alive because of religion. This is a religious war. We're fighting radical Islam, who are compelled by their religious doctrine, their view of God, to do all these things, to kill or convert every Christian, to purify their faith, destroy the state of Israel, and they're doing it before our eyes. And this is 2015, and the world is pretty well sitting around watching. And this hearing shed light on the breadth of it. Y'all did such a good job talking about how widespread this is, the brutality in Iraq and Syria, but also the problems in Pakistan and Turkey. And I just cannot tell you how informed that hearing made me. And we'll take action on it. We'll put more money in the budget to protect religious liberties. We're going to try to amend some laws that will allow us to cut money off to the bad actors.
And Senator Graham, historically, this has been a bipartisan issue, both parties working on religious freedom. But there seems to be a different view of religious freedom from the White House. And this administration does not seem to be sympathetic at all to the protection of Christians and other religious minorities abroad.
Well, you know, the president has a reluctance to embrace what everybody sees as an obvious event, a religious war going on in the Mideast, where you have radical Sunnis that have adopted a version of Islam that requires them to kill anything and everything within their capacity to do so, to establish a caliphate and to create a master religion for the world. Well, you know, Hitler tried to create a master race, and we got to stop them over there. We've got to come to the aid of our Christian brothers and sisters, to Muslims who are being killed because they won't agree with these guys, to the Yazidis, to just anybody that gets in their way. Because if they will do that over there, I think what they would do here, and the administration, the president, has been reluctant to call it radical Islam. But I would say that the ambassador today that he's appointed seems to have the right attitude, and we'll just see where it goes.
Yeah, I think you're right, Senator Graham, and I also thought it was good. And you just made that statement again, but you made it in the hearing today, drawing the parallel between Nazi Germany. And I think we also have to draw the parallel when we look at what Nazi Germany did and the parallel to what the rest of the world did not do back then.
Right.
In the 30s and 40s, and so we see that again, where there's this reluctance to call this what it is, this genocide that's taking place in the Middle East.
Yeah, and here's the comparison. Everybody kind of wrote Hitler off as he just wants German-speaking populations back. Maybe we went too far in the Treaty of Versailles, and he's a guy you can actually do business with. Well, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf,
right?
And you should have read the book. Churchill figured the guy out. Neville Chamberlain didn't. ISIL cannot be accommodated. They cannot be bargained with. They cannot be negotiated with. They have to be killed or captured. They're on a mission from God. They're crazy. They're slaughtering people as I speak. They're raping women and children. And what they're doing in the name of God needs to be stopped by people who truly represent God's word.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I hope we can form an alliance of people within the faith who will say no. And here's the good news. Most people over there are not buying what these guys are selling, and they're not going to turn their daughters over to them if they can say no. It's in our interest to help them. It's in our interest to help the Christian community who's literally, this is genocide. We live in 2015. Religious genocide's going on before our eyes, and President Obama is just very reluctant to embrace what all of us see.
Well, because once the president does acknowledge it for what it is,
he has to act.
He has to act. We're obligated under...
This is the 30s. You're right. They could see what Hitler was doing, but they were war-weary. Right. There's another thing that you mentioned about a Republican majority. This hearing today, I'm glad we had it. I think it shed light on something that should really affect every American, whether you're black, white, rich, poor, Republican, or Democrat. You should be concerned about this because this is a fundamental precept of who we are, is religious freedom, and it has been extinguished before our eyes. The oldest Christian community in the world is in the Mideast, and they're being eradicated. And I just can't believe that we're so indifferent as a world, and that's why I wanted to have the hearing. And you were so eloquent, all of you were, about the devastation, and to think that you can ignore it over there and it won't eventually hit us here is exactly what happened in Nazi Germany. Mm-hmm. It eventually caught up with the world, and Iran with a nuclear weapon is the greatest threat on the planet. ISIL is a close second, and this is the 30s. Putin's on the march in Europe, gobbling up his neighbors. Nobody's doing anything about it. We're negotiating with radical ayatollahs. The president said that our letter to the ayatollahs saying we're not going to approve any deal unless we vote on it in Congress, that the president can't negotiate away congressional sanctions without our approval. He said that we were empowering the hardliners. Tony, who are the moderates in Iran in charge of the government? I'd like to know who they are.
That's right. You're listening to Washington Watch. I'm your host, Tony Perkins. Thanks so much for joining us this Wednesday afternoon. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, my guest, chairman of Senate Appropriations subcommittee, had a hearing today. Senator, let me unpack that just a little bit, because some of our listeners, we have not talked about that. The letter that you and almost all of your Republican colleagues sent to Iran, based upon, well, I would say in large part probably motivated by what we heard last week from the Prime Minister of Israel. Explain to our listeners the purpose behind that letter.
Okay, I'm glad we brought the topic up. The media has gone nuts with this, calling us treasonous, and it's just crazy. Here's what happened. I've been working in a bipartisan fashion to create legislation that says the following. The congressional sanctions that we created against Iran that passed the Congress, signed into law by the president, cannot be relieved unless we agree. So he's negotiating with the Iranians about UN sanctions, about European sanctions, but also about congressional sanctions. He threatened to veto the bill that 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans came up with, requiring us to vote on any deal before we relieve congressional sanctions. And when he did that, to me, that's breathtaking. That's the President of the United States telling the Congress, I will determine when congressional sanctions are relieved, not you. So we wrote the letter to tell the Ayatollahs, the President, and the world, do not assume for one moment that if you negotiate with the President and he says, I will relieve congressional sanctions, that will happen. without our agreement and without a vote by the Congress. So this is an imperial presidency run amok, and the reason we sent the letter was because when the president told us he was going to veto our bill, insisting we have a say about the sanctions we created, that was a signal to me that we needed to set the Iranians and the whole world straight.
Amazing. Especially given what the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, laid out, I thought, a very compelling case of
Absolutely.
the threat, not only to his country, but to the entire world if we continue down this path, allowing Iran to obtain nuclear weapons, which they're on the path to do.
Well, for 20 years, they've been lying about their program. They have toppled 4 Arab governments in the region as we negotiate regarding their nuclear program. When the president says that we're empowering the hardliners, he must have concluded in his own mind there's some moderate elements in this government that he could do business with. That is scary. There are no moderates in the government in Iran. The moderates were killed in the streets in 2009. Look what the regime is doing without a nuclear weapon. They took down the pro-American government in Yemen by supporting the Houthis.
Right.
Assad's a puppet. He's killed 220,000 people. He couldn't last 15 minutes without the Iranian support. Hezbollah, who constantly attacks Israel, killed our Marines. They're now destabilizing Lebanon. And Tikrit is being taken over by Shia-led militias under the control of Iran. So the Arabs are going crazy. They're saying, what do you mean you're negotiating with these guys? What I would do is I say, we're not going to talk to you anymore about your nuclear program. We're going to reimpose sanctions until you stop destabilizing the Mideast.
Well, it came up in the hearing today, Senator Graham, as we were talking about this religious freedom. Iran was mentioned because they're an abuser of
by
religious
everybody,
freedom.
not just by you, by everybody on the panel.
And they currently hold an American citizen, Pastor Saeed
Right.
Abedini, who's been there for almost 3 years in a prison in Iran. I just have a difficult time with our administration sitting down to negotiate with Iran in good faith. I mean, if they were really going to negotiate with Iran, you would think that Iran, out of
Yes.
a good faith gesture, or even under demands of this administration before negotiations began, would release this American.
You got people negotiating with the Iranians who negotiated the North Korean deal. Bibi's fear, the Prime Minister of Israel, my fear is that they're going to do a deal with the Iranians, locking in place thousands of centrifuges that one day will be used to create a bomb, and the only thing between the Iranians and a nuclear weapon is the UN. That did not work out well in North Korea. But you got people negotiating who have never bought a car. I don't think John Kerry and Barack Obama probably have ever bought a car. They're negotiating with the oldest rug merchants in the world, the Iranians, who have been caught twice lying about their nuclear program. When they say they are not trying to build a bomb, they're liars. Let me tell you, the Sunni Arabs live in mortal fear of the Shia Persians. Israel has nuclear weapons. Everybody believes that, knows that, even though Israel doesn't admit it. Not one Arab nation felt the need to get a nuclear weapon because Israel has one, because they know that Israel will not blow them up.
Exactly.
But they're telling us that if Iran gets one, we're going to get one. We're on the verge of a nuclear arms race in the Mideast if they continue to do what they're doing.
10 years ago, I would have never envisioned the Middle East being in such turmoil and uncertainty as
a
it
year
is today.
ago.
Yeah. But we're seeing the policy decisions of. I mean, this is why elections have consequences, and we're seeing these bad foreign policy decisions now manifesting and coming to fruition.
Well, he decided not to leave any troops behind in Iraq. Obama did, and the general said you need 10,000. He turned down the recommendation of his entire national security team to create a no-fly zone, helped the Free Syrian Army 3 years ago. He drew a red line with Assad and did nothing about it. So this is not an accidental event. Al-Qaeda in Iraq was the predecessor to ISIL. They came back. They were on their knees because we didn't leave troops behind. And at the end of the day, this is a guy who has let the Mideast just turn into hell on earth. Yeah. Radical Islam is running wild, and the Iranians on the verge of doing a deal that will threaten Israel And my big fear is they would share the nuclear technology with the terrorists, and it would work its way
Right.
here.
Absolutely.
That's why elections do matter. One last point. If it were not for the Republican-controlled Congress, we would never vote on a deal with Iran. Harry Reid never let us vote on sanctions against Iran because the Obama administration told him, don't do that. Now that Mitch McConnell's in charge, we will get to vote on any Iranian deal and stop a bad deal. That's what this election really brought about.
Senator Graham, we've got to leave it there. We're out of time. Thanks so much for being with us, and appreciate, again, that hearing today.
Well done, Tony. God bless.